Hey everyone, welcome back into a new episode of the Cherry Heat Check. This is an unofficial New Mexico Lobos basketball podcast. Today, Thursday, January 29th, we are midway through the Mountain West season with all teams playing 10 games so far. Lobos sitting at 17-4, 8-2 in conference after defeating UNLV 2 nights ago. I will break down that UNLV game to kick off the show here before previewing San Jose State, who will host the Lobos this Saturday out here in the Bay Area where I now reside. I will be at that game again this year with my wonderful wife, taking it in as a fan. So looking for the Lobos to continue their winning ways there. But since we're at the midway part through the conference season here, I will give out my mid-season awards: Player of the Year, Coach of the Year, and first and second team all Mountain West per yours truly. So thank you everyone that has subscribed, followed on YouTube, Spotify, Apple. Really appreciate all the listeners and commenters, discussions we have on X and in the comments. So keep the questions and comments coming. Let's get into the show. Looking at the latest results over this past Tuesday and Wednesday of the last week of January, Grand Canyon losing a heartbreaker to Nevada, a game where GCU was up 3 points with 25 seconds left. Jaden Henley, their star player, went to the line for a 1-and-1. He missed the front end of a 1-and-1. Nevada ultimately came down. Tyler Rollison shot a three-pointer for the Wolfpack where he was fouled on the three. He stepped up to the line and made all 3 free throws to send it to overtime. In an overtime, Corey Camper, Chuck Bailey were ultimately too much for Grand Canyon as Grand Canyon was down 2 starters in that game. This a critical game for both teams as they were tied going into it. Nevada now 7-3 as Grand Canyon falls to 6-3. The other game from Tuesday, Boise was out here at San Jose State, which was a close game in the first half where the Broncos only led by 3 points, but Drew Fielder, transfer from Georgetown, 16 points, 8 rebounds. Broncos turning it up in the second half, outscoring San Jose State 53-25, ultimately winning 89-58. So San Jose State, who I'll talk about later, has been dealing with injury. They did regain Colby Garland, who came off the bench in this game versus Boise at home. We'll see if he starts or not versus the Lobos. And last night we had 2 kind of drowsy games that were not exciting. Wyoming dropping their 7th game in conference at Utah State, losing in Logan 94-62 in a game that was never close. Colby King stepping up for the Aggies off the bench, 20 points, 7 rebounds for he. And Utah State sitting up tied with New Mexico in second place. We'll take a deeper look at the standings in a minute here. Other game from last night, undermanned San Diego State team going into the game without big man Magoon Guath, without starting freshman point guard LZ Harrington. Didn't really matter for San Diego State as they blew out the Rams in the second half and win 73-50. Restix and Waters for the Aztecs really coming into form now after not playing last year. He's shooting the ball extremely well. Miles Bird defending at a very high level. And all their pieces are really fitting together, even though they have guys out. So San Diego State, the game that got away from the Lobos down the stretch, they now sit atop the standings at the midway point here at 9-1. Of course, New Mexico and Utah State 1 game back at 8-2. Those 2 teams will play next week in the pit. So that game will be ever important. Below them, Nevada now sits in 4th place at 7-3. Grand Canyon 6-3. UNLV falls to 5-4 after losing to the Lobos. And Boise State has quietly won 4 in a row now. They climbing back into it at 5-5. Fresno State, below them at 3-6, followed by Colorado State, Wyoming, San Jose State, and Air Force. Now going back to focus on that Lobos game in Vegas, which was a rout from the beginning. Josh Pastner, the first-year coach of the Rebels, calling a timeout in the opening 2 minutes, I think about a minute and a half into the game after it was 4-0. Tyron Jones, the freshman for UNLV, who's been playing big and important minutes for them, he injuring his shoulder, would never return in this game after the opening minute, and the Lobos never looked back in this game as they caused just a crazy amount of turnovers, forcing 16 total in that game. UNLV was having problems getting into their offense without a true point guard out there, made things even worse as it just seemed like they were passing the ball to the Lobos at times in the first half, and New Mexico was able to open that big lead up early. Um, of course, Tomislav Boljan dominating that first half, and he could do no wrong, whether it be putbacks, dunks, nailing 2 three-pointers, one which clanked off the rim and somehow found a way in, and another that was a swish. Second half, they didn't really do that as much, didn't really need to, as other guys stepped up. But looking at who actually played for UNLV and the impact they had, their leader so far in conference play, leading scorer in the conference, Dre Gibbs, Lawhorn finishing with only 8 points, fouling out in this game, in foul trouble for the end of the second half, end of the first half, most of the second. He not hitting a three-pointer in this game, finishing 3 for 11 from the field. And Kamani Hamilton, other starter who's usually an impact player for them, transfer from High Point, only 2 points for Hamilton, 5 rebounds, and UNLV did not hit a three-pointer in the first half as that defense of New Mexico just continues to improve and make things hard on three-point shooters. And they force one of the lowest three-point percentage rates in the country, even though, as I've mentioned all year, they want teams to shoot that shot. You really see how Eric Olin's schemes and strategy are just becoming more in your face as the season goes on, and the analytics really point this team more in the direction of where we know he wants to go ultimately, as Lobos defense continues to be their main strength so far, just really disrupting, dismantling, and embarrassing UNLV in this game, where I think most of the fans left with double-digit minutes on the clock in the second half of that one. But Jake Hall finding a way in the second half to hit above his season average, 16 points, 7 for 11 from the field, 2 three-pointers. And what amazes me about Jake Hall is just the way he's able to hit these three-point shots or jumpers, whether it's coming off a screen where it's a pin down and he curls off a screen. Now he's also comfortable playing the dribble handoff role with Tannett, where Tannett will set a pick with him and hand the ball off to him, or vice versa, where Hall will handle the ball and dribble right into a three. And then just his ability to catch and shoot. He does not even dip his knees or arms sometimes when he catches it in the corner and lets it go. If he catches it in that shooting position, it is almost up. So the way that he's able to get his shot off, of course, along with the pump fakes and the slow Euro Pinoy steps that he takes, it's just incredible to watch him score and manipulate the defense. And you can tell that mentally he's a few steps ahead of most players on the court. And Eric Olin even talked about his playmaking and passing and how there's something more to offer in that realm of his game. But at this point, they're asking him to do, the heavier load of the scoring. So very exciting to continue to see him evolve and to hear Eric Olin say that there's even another layer of J. Call that we can expect in the playmaking area. Antonio Chol in this one, all his shots from three, again, finishing with 6 points on 2 of 4 from downtown. Did chip in with 5 rebounds, 4 assists. The concerning thing about Chol is I think he's only shot at maybe 2 or 4 free throws thus far in conference play and has no desire to get to the hoop. And I think defenses are more aware of that and only have to play the 3-point shot. Has to be willing to at least have a head fake, go to the mid range, and once or twice a game, just go to the hoop as hard as he can to try to get a foul, because Lobos right now in conference play sit in dead last in terms of free throws attempted. So not getting many attempts at the line. And when they get into these close games with the Utah State, with the San Diego State, who they'll face again, they need to get to the line at the end of the games rather than rely on jump shots or three-pointers. So even though Chol, I know, isn't someone that's going to constantly go to the hoop, he needs to do that once or twice a game to open up space for himself from deep. Dayton Albury, another solid performance, 11 points, was getting to the rim with ease in this one, 5 assists for Albury to go along with 4 rebounds. Tenacious defense, only 1 steal, but it seemed like he had a bunch of deflections or just pressure that caused UNLV into crazy passes. And the unit that I was really critiquing over Twitter, leading up to the game, was that of the bench unit, who came in scoring 35 points per game at home in conference play and only around 20 points per game on the road in conference play. And we know that starts with Uriah Tenet, JT Rock, and Tajavis Miller. So they, in this game, on the road, stepping up their performance from what they had been doing on the road previously. Rock finishing with 6 points, 4 rebounds, 0 for 2 from 3. He has only hit 1 3-pointer on the road all season, so more likely to hit threes at home. Hopefully he can hit one out here in San Jose State this weekend. But Tenet, who I call the 6th starter, probably would be 6th man of the year in the conference if it weren't for what BJ Davis is doing at San Diego State, but you never know. Tenet finishing with 15 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 big-time three-pointers for Tenet as his shot becomes just more and more comfortable for him in the spots he likes it. And his defense, one of the most impactful defenders at that point of attack position for the Lobos. Just his peskiness, disruptiveness. Can't say enough about his overall impact on the team so far. And to Javis Miller, other bench guy that's been seeing consistent minutes with Hal out. He playing 26 minutes in this game, finishing with 8 points on 2 of 5 shooting, and still waiting on Chris Howell to return, as we know. He obviously would be a big help against these tougher teams at Utah State and San Diego State, but we still await Howell's return from an abdomen injury. No real updates other than it could be another few weeks per Jeff Grammer and Eric Olin. Looking at the Lobos shot chart in this one, it is almost picture perfect per what Eric Olin would like, with all the shots coming from in the paint or 3-point range except one mid-range shot, which they hit. Can't remember who that was. But the Lobos spreading it around the arc from 3, getting to the rim, of course, scoring in transition, but also in their set offense. Really seeing the different layers now of the offense that Eric Olin promised us in preseason that we might see if this team got comfortable enough with the offense. I think we're at the point now where there's different levels and interactions in the offense that we're seeing that we didn't see in the early part. So Lobos shot chart, exactly what you would expect at this point of the year. And the team carrying out this offensive game plan perfectly in this one. So this next three-game stretch after the San Jose State game will be critical for UNM versus Utah State at home, Boise State at home, and then on the road at GCU. Just a critical stretch that may decide where the Lobos end up come the end of the season here. But before that, UNM cannot overlook the Spartans and Tim Miles' team coming in at 6-15 on the year. New Mexico, of course, losing at San Jose State last year with Donovan Dent, True Washington, Amzil, and others. A late offensive rebound by Latrell Davis in San Jose State ended up in a three-pointer that would cap the game in an upset. UNM cannot afford that as the Lobos currently sit as a team that looks like they will get an at-large berth if the tournament started today. Of course, 10 more games to go and a conference tournament. But this, a game they cannot overlook, an arena that will not have many fans outside of me and my wife, the Lobo Club members, Kurt Roth, and maybe the band from San Jose State, Jeff Grammer, reporters, Nick Urias, and broadcasters. There will not be many people there, and it is an empty, dead feeling. Hoping UNM can continue their mojo. Colby Garland is now back for San Jose State after missing a handful of games. He's scoring over 18 points a game for the Lobos. In that first game, the Lobos did win by 23 points. Bojan did not play in that early non-con matchup. So look for this game to play out differently and have a different flow. Big men that will be challenged with guarding Bojan will be Yafet Mondi, averaging 12 points, 7 boards so far this season. The other two guards that will be helping out with the scoring duties alongside Garland will be Ben Roseborough, Jermaine Washington. Washington, the sophomore, explosive defender, three-point shooter, shooting 37% from deep, averages 1 steal a game to go along with his 11 points and 2 rebounds. He's one of my favorite players to watch in the conference, but San Jose State not able to get any chemistry so far in conference play as their roster has just been up and down. Tim Miles only has 8 players in some of their games so far, and it has been ugly at times for the Spartans. The Lobos look to be favored in the Ken Palm prediction by 14 points, a score of 80-66. I think it'll get much uglier than that one, and they will pretty much replicate what they did to UNLV, but they'll do the same down here in San Jose State and not do what the Lobos and Richard Pitino's team did last year, laying an egg in a conference game that they could not afford to lose. And if the Lobos want to keep pace with this at-large berth resume, this is not a game, obviously, they can afford to drop. Look for UNM to come out hot early, hopefully not have to play their starters the whole game as they gear up for a tough Utah State game next week. But San Jose State is due to give someone a run here. No better place to do it than back at home as they have Garland back, Jermaine Washington playing good basketball for the Spartans, and Tim Miles as well. But I will be excited to be there and expect the Lobos to run away with it. Other games that will be occurring on Friday and Saturday of this week. Boise State now travels to Grand Canyon on Friday night. UNLV will have their rivalry game in Reno with Nevada on Friday. And the Lobos will, of course, be in San Jose State. San Diego State and Utah State will do battle at 10 a.m. Pacific out here on CBS. Obviously, that being a huge game in the conference and for both teams determining first place. Fresno State and Air Force will play a few hours later, followed by Colorado State at Wyoming at 6:30 Pacific. And since we are now at the midway point of conference season, the last season of the Mountain West as we know it, with new teams coming in next year and some of the current teams exiting, I will give you my mid-season awards here for the conference. First team all conference, Jaden Henley out of GCU, one of the leading scorers in the conference, getting to the line more than anyone in the conference, of course, missing the front end of one in Nevada the other night he wishes he could have back. But the transfer from UNLV having a huge impact for Bryce Drew this year for the Lopes. Tomislav Boljan making it to my first team, double-double machine, leading the league in rebounding and double-doubles. Can't say enough about this first-year player, even though we all know he's 23 years old, still dealing with a new country, new way of playing basketball, and all the things that go along with that. He's stepping up big in conference play. MJ Collins of Utah State, one of the leading scorers and just leaders of the Aggies in general, coming over from Vanderbilt, has been key for the Aggies all season and in conference play. He joining Mason Falslev on my first team here. Falslev, scorer, rebounder, guy that will pass, steal the ball, tenacious defender, doing it all for the Aggies so far, making the first team here. And Elijah Price of the Wolfpack, transferring over from Fresno State, one of the best rebounders, post defenders, and even knocked down a 3 against New Mexico last week. And so elevating his game, stretching his distance. To me, he's one of the best players in conference right now. And looking at the second team, I know anyone from San Diego State that listens to this are wondering where the heck the Aztecs are. Well, I have BJ Davis, Miles Bird, probably could have Reese Dixon Waters along here as well, but BJ Davis coming off the bench in all the games except one. He being key player, leading scorer for the Aztecs so far, and big part of that defensive tenacity for Coach Dutcher. Alongside him, Miles Bird, who's kind of had an up and down season, and that's continued in conference play on the offensive side. But his defense never falters, has some arms that go on for days, and steals the ball, gets deflections, runouts into huge dunks, deflected shots, had a big block against Antonio Chol and the Lobos in the second half of that game in Viejas. So his defense ever impactful this year. Joining him on my second team here, freshman Jake Hall for the Lobos. He leading the league in three-point makes, finding a variety of ways to score and impact the game. And his defense is really nothing to frown at either, as he's picked it up on that end and found ways to get his teammates involved. So freshman Jake Hall making the second team here for me. Another Wolfpack player under Coach Alford who's been fantastic, Corey Camper Jr., coming over this season, lighting it up from distance these past few games. He making some important shots against GCU in that win in overtime in Reno, looking like one of the best scorers in the conference this year. And another freshman I have alongside Jake Hall here is Deshaun Gorey of Fresno State, averaging somewhere along the lines of, I want to say 14-6 or 14-7 as a freshman, kind of undersized at that forward position, but his motor just never slows down. Scored over 30 points against the Lobos in their loss against UNM. But he being one of the better freshmen in a loaded freshman class, for me, he makes a second team so far this year. And looking at Coach of the Year, none other than Eric Olin of the Lobos, coming back with all new players, all new staff, coming to the unknown land of enchantment in a conference he's unfamiliar with. 8-2 in conference so far. When you compare the returning players that San Diego State, Utah State had coming back, you could say, they were a mile ahead of where the Lobos were going into the year as far as competition-wise. But here lie the Lobos halfway through conference play, tied for second place with the Aggies, only one game back of the Aztecs, a team they could have beaten, had opportunities to beat. So a couple big opportunities, as I mentioned, coming up in the next 2 weeks. Of course, another one versus San Diego State down the stretch at home that they'll want payback for. So the Lobos really just looking to avoid any blemishes against the bad teams, as that early New Mexico State loss that Olin and the Lobos had against the Aggies in Cruces, looking like the only real blemish, as the Aggies have really fallen as of late, and I think are almost about second to last in their conference right now. But wrapping out my Mountain West Conference awards here, Player of the Year thus far, Mason Falslev of Utah State. Fantastic player, of course, deciding to come back under Coach Calhoun. Still could come back next year as well. Is a married guy that owns a house there, is my understanding. They call him the mayor of Logan, and he has lived up to it this season, being their leader vocally on defense, getting the transfers and freshmen, I think, to understand Calhoun's systems on the court. He just impacting the game in every way, and they only losing 2 games in conference, 1 game in the non-conference. Can't say enough about his impact, but is still early. I would say the players challenging Falslev right now. I think you would have to put Tomislav Boyan up there alongside Jaden Henley of GCU, and I would have to say Miles Bird for San Diego State. Tough to say who's been the most impactful on that team, even though they sit atop first place. So I want to thank everyone again for tuning in. Again, I will be out there at that San Jose State game. So if any of you are traveling, hit me up on X or in the comments here, and let's try to hook up while you're out here. I'm looking forward to seeing the Lobos. This will be my second game this year. First was in the pit against Alabama A&M, which was, of course, a double-digit comeback. Hoping this one does not come down to that, as I expect the Lobos to win big. So thanks again, and I will catch you guys on the next Cherry Heat Check.